Bonjour, I'm Ivy Vineo, and what you're about to listen to is First Light, Carl Gawboy, Wendy Savage, and the Ojibwe Art Expo. This is a 3-part series diving into the Anishinaabe art scene past and present with 2 of Minnesota's established and respected Ojibwe artists who were heavily involved in the Ojibwe Art Expo. You've heard of it, right? It was a mostly annual traveling exhibition for several decades. It got started in the late 1960s and was partly inspired by the vibrant and growing American Indian art scene in Santa Fe at that time. This series is for anyone who wants an inside look at Native art history in Minnesota, representation and support or lack thereof, and how American Indian art has evolved and positively impacted the lives of so many Native artists over the past 40 to 50 years. White Earth Nation direct descendant Jill Dorfler serves as the interviewer for this series. This program was made possible through the support from Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, Arrowhead Regional Arts Council, and Northland Foundation's Mataukin Grant. In our last podcast episode of First Light, Carl Gawboy, Wendy Savage, and the Ojibwe Art Expo, you will hear these artists reflecting on their experiences and sharing their perspectives on the Native art world today. You'll also hear about issues concerning Native identity, the reality of having grants and funding resources for Native artists today. Wendy and Carl also share some important advice for emerging artists.
Bonjour, hello and welcome. I'm Jill Dorfler and I'm the host for this program. I'm currently a professor and department head of American Indian Studies at the University of Minnesota, Duluth. I was born and raised on the White Earth Reservation. My mother is enrolled there, and I'm a first-degree descendant. It's my pleasure to have a conversation with Ojibwe artists Wendy Savage and Carl Gawboy today. They've agreed to share some stories about their experiences in the art world, and particularly about the Ojibwe Art Expo, comparing the 60s and 70s when the expo got started to how things are today. What are some of the major changes that you both have observed in these over this time period?
Well, one thing that I've noticed, and even the like the first Walker Art Center exhibit on American Indian art, is that there'd be certain ideas that museums would have as to how Indian art should be exhibited. And one idea was that it should be exhibited with old pieces. So they dig out of the museum some old, dusty, falling apart things and exhibit them next to contemporary American Indian artists. And I took part in a couple of these shows. And some of the artists said that we're competing with our dead ancestors. That has changed. So the Minneapolis Art Institute had a whole gallery when Jim Demity had his one-man show there. It was great. It was just that's when I kind of thought that we've finally arrived, that we didn't have to be anthropological objects anymore. They could be artists. Yeah. And then there are, in Duluth here, there's a private gallery that carries American Indian painting, contemporary art. Nationally, there's the big museum in Washington, D.C., next to the Smithsonian. Yeah. Now, that wasn't around when the Ojibwe Art Expo started. And the big contemporary art gallery in the top floor of that building is named for George Morrison, one of our own.
We were kind of like shunned and not part of it in the early 60s and the 70s. And around the 70s, it started to change a little bit. But basically what I noticed is most of my input is I'd get telephone calls from people that would want some specific generic Indian information. Or, well, we have to do something because it's in our strategic plan.
Oh, boy.
But we're not going to pay you. What are you going to do for us? And so I was just like, really, leave the old lady alone. And so that still, I think, is a little prevalent today also. And it's gotten better. But then the newest thing now is everybody's fighting over who's a native and who's not a native. And then we have the Indian Arts and Craft law, the federal law. And I mean, that's a whole nother can of worms.
Right.
That only enrolled
Yeah.
people are
Buffy St. Marie.
Buffy. She's the latest one. And then we had, some people that pretend they're Native and make up their background and make a lot of money, because there are a few grants for Natives. It's still very, very tiny, and the competition is very difficult to get those. And so the institutions that give those grants have to start doing their due diligence. And when a person identifies as Native, they need to give documentation. Because whenever I write a grant that has federal money for it, I literally have to enclose in my grant form my little piece of paper from the Minnesota Chippewa tribe with my number.
Yeah.
And basically what institutions are doing is you just check the box. So anybody can check the box.
Yeah.
And there are people out there that will do that.
Yeah.
And again, it's like the artists themselves, now it's our responsibility to say, hey, I don't think that person is who they're saying they are.
Yeah.
And I don't know the answer. I really don't know the answer, but it's federal law.
Yeah, when the expo started, we were a little concerned about that because it was already happening elsewhere in the country. And we thought we'll just trust the artists, to be honest. Indian artists should enter the show, and we trusted them. Once in a while, we got burned.
Sure.
But that just went with the territory.
Yeah, and the Ojibwe Art Expo wasn't just for Ojibwe people. We opened it up for any Native that was living in Minnesota. So, we did get a lot of Dakota artists. And now it's even more different because Native people are traveling more and intermarrying more.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. A lot of artists have multiple backgrounds.
Multiple backgrounds and things like that.
And it does. I think you brought up a good point about identity, and that really gets us back to that topic of sovereignty and political status. Like you said, Wendy, for Native people, it's not checking a box of sort of ethnicity. Our status is inherently political, and there is some legal documentation that goes along with that. And it's not always easy, and it's certainly not perfect, but there is questions and a need to have sort of transparency around that today. So definitely one of the things that's coming up in the art world today that also came up then, but it remains. Other trends and issues that maybe are still here from the 60s and 70s that we're still dealing with. I teach in American Indian Studies, and sometimes I have to say we're still dealing with these stereotypes about American Indians in the historic past. And yes, we're making headway, but there's still ways to go. So things that you see that might be the same or different over time.
I think we have more Native American artists, people going into it, looking at it as a lifestyle and maybe their job. It's still difficult, but again, with more grants available and more competition available and more galleries available.
And then art programs are more available. There's always that old institute in Santa Fe, which they could attend. That's still there.
And then tribal colleges are also offering classes.
That's right.
What we're very lucky for, I just did an exhibition that just went down at Tweed Museum of Art, and I wanted to show then and now the things that, how it hasn't changed that much. We're still doing it. We're still doing everything. But what I realized is we're very lucky with the Fond du Lac Community and Tribal College is they are doing community classes to revitalize things. Like I brought in the full birch bark canoe. And I said, this was a community project.
Yeah.
And out of that community project, we had this young man, Tom House, wanted to, and it was open to anybody. He came to that canoe and he goes, because they were bending ribs, he goes, I'm having a set of twins. Can you guys show me how to bend the pieces for the cradle board? So after the canoe was built, they showed him how to steam wood, and now this guy is a master at making cradle boards. And I said, do you see the story that it goes along with it? And then now Tom also is creating lacrosse sticks. And now his passion right now is lacrosse. And I said, see how one other thing leads to another. And the other thing I brought into the show was I was a weaver. Is when I did pottery, weaving, and photography when I went to school. And I wanted to research the Ojibwe mats. And back then there was no internet, no computers. I literally had to go back in UMD, way back in the corner, in their historical library, where you had to pay 25 cents a page to Xerox stuff. And I researched the mats, the cedar mats, the bulrush mats, the cattail mats. We did, with one of our language camps at Fond du Lac, they brought in a man, and they were doing a cedar bark mat. And we were running, and I was going, "Oh, this is fabulous! I'm learning how to do this." And I had my old, pages from the historical society, library. And my brother was running around talking to my uncle, who's going to be 90 this year, is going, "Did you ever see one of these mats when you were a kid? Did you ever see that?" And he said, "No, I do not remember seeing a cedar bark mat." Yeah. So that was almost 100 years and now those cedar mats are being made.
Yeah.
And Tom, and I gave Tom all my information, and he did a workshop, and that cedar mat was also in that exhibition. So we're very, very lucky that with our community colleges and in partnership with the Fond du Lac Reservation, that they're offering these really exciting workshops that are open to the community for them to come and see. I think that's exciting.
That's fantastic.
It's really, really making some of these ancient art forms continue alive, but it's going to be exciting to where they take them next. Where it's taking next. And when the art scene would jump on board, it is beyond me. I've kind of weaned myself from the art scene. I'm trying to retire. It's now the seventh time.
Okay.
And I said, I'm not curating anymore, and I just announced it. And then 2 days later, I got a text from a dear friend. Hey, you want to curate an art show? So I don't know. I don't know what's going to do, but I just... It's come to the time for me to really retire. I guess I need a personal assistant, about 3 personal assistants. So Native American artists as a group are willing to share and willing to celebrate. Like I could call up Jonathan Thunder if I needed something. Hey, Jonathan, I need this poster made. And he'll do it. And Herb Fine-Day, I'm going, hey, I'm working on this art thing. I need for you to give me a design to put on this coloring page and book that we're going to have for these kids. And they'll do it.
Yeah.
But the other thing is I also make sure in the budget that they get paid something.
Yay.
They deserve to be paid. So it's exciting. I think it's an exciting time. And right now, the Indian arts are really high, and what's really I'm excited about is Native American fashion right now. Yeah. I'm so excited about what's going on with that. A lot of it's women's art and women's work. You've got like Delana White. She's fabulous.
The whole world of fashion.
The whole world of
paying attention to Indians now. Delana White's part of it.
She's part of it. And the Buckanaga Social Club, those girls, those lovely girls in Mille Lacs. And we just did a quick little art show, a fashion show at Tweed. And it was just community members. Yeah. We didn't have, they were all busy. You couldn't get Delana White and everybody. But it worked perfect. There wasn't one thing that went wrong. And the community just went nuts for it.
Yep, it was great. It was great.
Ribbon skirts, to see ribbon skirts all across the United States on the floor of Congress.
Yeah. In the Minnesota...
In the Minnesota...
Minnesota Capitol.
Yeah.
Yep, in the Minnesota Capitol. Yeah. On the streets.
Yeah. At
any event, you're seeing that. So the ribbon skirts are really exciting and hot right now. Yeah. And Indian fashion. So I think that's a whole nother area
Yep, that everyday art goes back to
that
that
goes to the
everyday
everyday art,
beautification.
yeah.
Everyday art is definitely resurging, and I think people feel proud and okay to express themselves in that way that people might not have felt previously. Wendy, you said you're trying to retire. I have a question about upcoming art exhibits, upcoming works of art, books. Carl, I know you have a new book that's just came out within the last few months, your illustrated work on the fur trade, but things for either of you that you are working on that our listeners might have keep an eye out for?
Well, at the end of August, we are bringing a show that Allison Auney and I curated at the Nordic Center. It was called Leading from Our Heart, and it was comparing Sami, Ojibwe, and the Nordic culture. It had such a great run that it's going to the Vesterheim Museum in Decoa, Iowa, and it's going to be there during their highlight of their season. And it's going to be there a long time. So in that research, I was looking and going, okay, so all these cultures, I'm going, what do these three cultures have in common? What do these three cultures have in common? And at the time, I was working on moss bags because I had new nieces coming. And then my dear friend, Winnie LaPrairie, had passed on. And I was using her pattern that she got from her mother, Teresa LaPrairie, who also was one of the few women who was part of the Reservation Business Committee. And I was going, swaddling. What culture didn't swaddle their babies? Every culture swaddled their babies. So then I was researching the Sami, and they wrapped their babies in a reindeer blanket, and they had them in like a cradle that they had made, but also they had stuffed it with moss, sphagnum moss. That's why it's called a moss bag, because it was stuffed with moss, because that was the diapers.
Yeah.
And then the Nordic people, well, what they did is they made these exquisite, beautiful christening bags that they would put their babies in. And it was a bag of protection. There were certain colors that they used. There was certain silver that they used on, because, way back then, a lot of babies didn't make it. They would get sick and literally die from a cold and things like that. So we compared and contrasted that and made a whole little booklet for school kids about swaddling. And then they also made bands. The Sami made these beautiful bands that they would wrap, the blankets around their baby. So that's kind of exciting that that's going down there. Personally, I'm working on a set of ribbon applique skirts. Takes me like 3 months to make one.
Wow. Because
I'm the queen of embellishment. It's like, oh, God, give me beads. And I'll go, oh, it needs some more work here. Oh, it needs a little silver over here. Oh, wait a minute. I'm at crystal beads. Oh, fringe. Here it goes. So I want to work on doing a whole 4 more really exquisite ribbon skirts with the applique designs. I don't know what I'm going to do with them. I hope a museum buys them.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of like why I want to retire, so I can just sit at home and do that.
Carl, things that you're up to that people can look out for?
Well, I hope I'm not saying something I shouldn't, but Tweed is planning an exhibit in the cases up on that second floor where the Nelson collection is, on the Fur Trade Nation book. With paintings, and I assume there'll be a Hudson Bay blanket there, and a couple of things that I've been collecting over the years, like my Hudson Bay draw knife, that will be exhibited there.
Oh,
so,
fantastic.
With the original paintings from the book.
From the book.
Oh, you
Great.
need a strap dress.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Oh,
I've got a strap dress.
Exactly.
You need a strap dress. That's the other thing
Exactly.
I'm researching.
Yes.
Now my nieces
Yes.
go,
Exactly.
I want a
I
strap
made a
dress.
big thing about strap dresses in that book, so there's got to be one in this exhibit. But we haven't met yet. We got kind of the okay,
Yep.
but we haven't really met and planned the exhibit yet.
So no
So
dates
yeah,
yet.
there's no date.
But, yeah.
It'll be in 2025,
Okay.
sometime late summer or next fall.
Meanwhile,
good.
if you don't have the book, get the book.
get the book.
Do you like it?
I like it. Yeah, I sleep with your book. That's what I have 2 books in my bed with me right now. Carl's book, and then, there's 3. And then there's a Tashia Hart's book, and then that Sweetgrass book.
Oh, that's yeah.
The Robin Wall Kimmer's.
Yeah. They're all in my bed.
So, as we've been talking about, our region is so rich with artists today, and I know that some of them will be listening to this podcast, and I'm hoping that you might both share some little bit of advice for up-and-coming artists. What are you thinking about and hoping for the future for Ojibwe arts and artists?
Oh, so many ideas. I want a wild rice museum. Mm-hmm. The whole works. Canoes, sticks, poles, pots, stirring sticks.
Baskets.
Big murals going through time. So write a grant for me, Wendy, and see if you can let's come up with this in some big building somewhere. And a good place for it would be on the way to Net Lake, right after when you get off Highway 53. Mm-hmm. About 4 stories, I think.
4.
Keep it sacred.
Keep it sacred.
Yeah.
I was going to say, well, Fond du Lac is doing a new convention center. We can put a couple of murals on the wall. I think the youth needs to do their research, talk to a lot of elders, and get ready for a lot of heartaches. Being an artist is not easy. The competition is really there, but if you're dedicated, you can do it because it's easier. Carl and I have suffered, and all the other artists have paved the way for you now. So just remember whose backs you're walking on as you get those $1 million grants, because now obviously Carl wants a wild rice museum. Do not listen to your art teachers. Do what you want to do and continue. I mean, at the time when I was doing a lot of my artwork in college, I was doing beadwork and that, and they didn't consider that fine art, and they didn't want it around. But I continue to pursue and do your research and follow your heart. And maybe we need some more natives to open up their own galleries. That's the one thing I wish I would have done, was open up my own art gallery. But as a single parent, you can only do so much.
Yeah.
Also, know your worth. Know your worth. Someone asks you to do something, the first thing out of your mouth is, and do you have money for this? Because you can volunteer in many other ways. Usually I always pick out an underserviced school that doesn't have an art program. Remember when I dragged you out to McGregor?
Yes.
That little booby. So that's what I usually do, is I look for an underserviced school, and I will offer, whatever curriculum that I've written in the last couple of years and send them out. In some of the grants, we make sure that we have enough money for like a bag and at least colored pencils, and then a little booklet with some information that we can send out to them, to their teachers, so they know. Like that Sami book that we did. I did a workshop at the community college, and I had like 4 of them left. And I wasn't expecting 40 people to show up because, of course, one person didn't show up, so they all came to my workshop. But the teachers went nuts, and I said, I only have 4. And she said, well, do you mind if I copy these? I said, no, copy them. And she says, well, can we teach this? And I said, well, of course you can go back and teach this.
That's the idea.
That's the idea. So there's a need for it, and whoever would have thought that, I'd hit these cloquet teachers, that were just dying for this basic information.
Yeah.
But it also showed the cross-cultural, because there's a lot of Finnish and Sami people there and a lot of Nordic people there.
Yeah, that's right. I remember driving back from McGregor. We were both just exhausted and in shock. And I did a little workshop where they made paper birch bark canoes, and then one of the kids went out and got a basin of water and then set the canoes down in the water to see if they floated upright. And of course they did. You were doing mucklucks, I think, or maybe mittens. And then I did a watercolor thing. We were wiped out, and as we were driving home, we both looked at each other and says, who is going to do this after us? Just...
I don't know who is doing it after us. Like I said, I want to retire.
But...
Well, I think for our listeners, it is a good message of thinking about what navigating that. When is the right time to volunteer and contribute and share and give to the community and places that are in need, and what is the time and the place to say sort of, where's my money, so to speak, of, like there's a time and a place to get paid, and then balancing that with that reciprocal going on within the community, which is what built the foundation of the art community that we enjoy and have here in the region today, is that generosity and sharing, teaching each other, doing the research online, but also, Wendy, like you said, connecting with the elders, going and connecting with somebody's work that you're inspired by to learn from them as well, so that it can keep building for future generations as we continue to go forward.
Yes, being a responsible community member is very important.
Yes.
Very, very, very important for everyone. It does not just for artists, for everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's such a need for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And for those looking to get into the art market of collecting and purchasing, I think being careful about researching who the artist is and making sure that it isn't a situation of appropriation or something like that, so that the proper artist is getting credit and that the artwork is legitimate, so to speak.
Yeah, and buy art from artists before they're dead.
Miigwech for listening to First Light, Carl Gawboy, Wendy Savage, and the Ojibwe Art Expo. Links to the other podcasts in this series, as well as links to a variety of other artist support resources, can be found online at thenorth1033.org. This has been Ivy Vineo, and this series was made possible through support from the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, the Arrowhead Regional Arts Council, and Northland Foundation's Matauking Grant. Miigwech Bizendaoyeg. Thank you for listening.